Hey everybody, welcome to Crack a Pack Tuesday number 65 on the Mana League. I'm John as always, and it's time for a pack of Eldritch Moon to be open. It's not out until Friday, but this is one of my prize packs from pre-release, so we're going to open it, and we're going to figure out what we would take pack one, pick one, if this were a draft. Now, of course, I have not drafted this set yet, so this is kind of based on my first opinions, based on my experiences from pre-release, stuff like that, but we'll see how it goes. Up first, we've got ourselves Olivias Dragoon. Olivias Dragoon is 1 and a black for a creature vampire berserker. It's a 2/2. You can discard a card to give Olivias Dragoon flying until end of turn. It's a perfectly serviceable bear. I think you'll always include them when you have them. If you get some use out of them, even better. It can help fuel Delirium. It can help do Madness, but really it's just a 2/2 with upside. You're always going to play it, but you're never going to search it out. It's a pretty late mid-pack pickup. Up next, we have Desperate Sentry. Desperate Sentry is 2 and a white for a creature human soldier. It's a 1/2. When Desperate Sentry dies, put a 3/2 colorless Eldrazi horror creature onto the battlefield. It has Delirium. Desperate Sentry gets +3/+0 as long as you have Delirium. So it's a 1/2 for 3, which is bad, but when it dies, it becomes a 3/2, which is good. And later in the game, when you have Delirium, it's a 3/2, which is fine as well, and it still makes a 3/2 when it dies. So I think it's a fine card, and I think you'll also probably include at least the first one of these almost always, but like Dragoon, I think it's a pretty mid to late mid-pack pickup, not a first pick. Up next, we have Distemper of Blood. Distemper of Blood is 1 and a red for a sorcery. Sorcery. It's a sorcery. Please remember that. At common, target creature gets +2/+2 and gains trample until end of turn. Madness for a single red. If you can Madness this is an okay combat trick. If you can't, this is garbage. This is just garbage. There's an awful lot of instant speed removal and flash creatures and tons of stuff for your opponent to say, okay, cool, thanks for letting me know your creature's bigger and has trample. Now it dies. Rather than having to go through the guessing game of figuring that out, at the combat damage step. So yeah, Distemper of Blood, I am out on. I think it's terrible. I don't think you should even play the first one. Up next, we have Wretched Grif. Wretched Grif is 7 generic mana for a creature Eldrazi Hippogriff. It's a 3/4. It has Emerge, 5 and a blue. It has Flying, and when you cast Wretched Grif, draw a card. Wretched Grif is fantastic. It's even better if you can emerge off of an Exultant Cultist, so you draw 2 cards for 4 mana and get a 3/4 flyer. This thing is just fantastic. I don't know if it'll be first pick or not, but it should be a relatively high pick, and you should end up falling into kind of blue-green Emerge. One of the best Emerge creatures, the best one at common, possibly the best one at uncommon even. It just quite doesn't make it for some of the rares, but it's just fantastic. I don't think it's first pickable, though, but let's keep it in frame, just in case it actually is. Up next, we have Gavin Unhallowed. Gavin Unhallowed is 3 and a black for a creature zombie. It's a 2/4. Whenever another creature you control dies, put a +1/+1 counter on Gavin Unhallowed. If you can build a sacrifice deck, this can probably get pretty good. Or if you have a bunch of chump blockers, you're producing infinite tokens, or you have some recursion, then this thing can get really big and demand an answer. There's a lot of work to set up to it, and I've yet to see if that deck truly exists in this format or not. If it does, then this probably gets a bit better. If it doesn't, this gets a little bit worse. But regardless, it's hovering around mid-pack. It's never really going to be a first pick. Up next, we have a Woodland Patrol. Woodland Patrol is 2 and a green for a 3/2 creature human scout with vigilance. That's it. Pretty, middling filler kind of card. Ever so slightly better than filler, I think, because it's a 3/2 for 3, which we're used to, but it does have an upside of vigilance. Again, it's mid-pack. It's no higher than mid-pack. Definitely not first pick. Up next, we have a Terrarium. Terrarium is 1 generic mana for an artifact. It enters the battlefield tapped. You can pay 2, tap it, and sack it to add 2 mana in any combination of colors to your mana pool. And when Terrarium is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, draw a card. This is fine. It'll help your splash if you are splashing a third color. This format is absolutely 100% a 2-color format. Don't try to go 3 colors unless there's a massively good reason. Just keep in mind, Terrarium is not ramp. It does not give you any extra mana. It's just turning 2 mana into 2 other mana, so it's just fixing. But if you need fixing, you can pick this up pretty late. It draws a card, which is nice, but you should not be going out of your way to pick this. Up next, we have Displaced. Displaced is 2 and a blue for an instant. Exile up to 2 target creatures you control, then return those cards to the battlefield under that owner's control. Terrible. Just terrible. If this could bounce opponents' creatures, cool, that would be awesome. But there's just not enough for this card to do anything. You would have to have basically every creature in your library having an enter the battlefield effect, and that enter the battlefield effect being a really, really good one. And it just doesn't exist. This card is just not worth it. It's basically a fog and a bad fog at that at best, so Displaced, totally out on. Our last common is Falcon Wrath Reaver, 1 in a red for a 2/2 creature vampire. End of story. If you're red, you're going to play this guy, and you're going to pick it if it's one of the last red cards in the pack. You're obviously going to pick this over most combat tricks, unless they're decent ones, but you're never going to pick it over a better creature, or even a better creature in a different color if you haven't quite decided on your colors yet. But you'll always play it when you have it. You're just going to pick it relatively late. Our first uncommon is Whispers of Emrakul. Whispers of Emrakul is 1 and a black for a sorcery. Target opponent discards a card at random. If you have Delirium, target opponent discards 2 cards at random. If you have Delirium, this gets much better if you get Delirium quickly. You want to be casting this relatively early in the game. You want to be casting this ideally on turn 2 to make it a Hymn to Turak, but you're not going to have Delirium on turn 2. But you don't want to cast this much later than turn 3 or 4 or 5. After that, this just goes way down. I would never first pick this card, and it's debatable if you would even play it. Up next, we have Insatiable Gorgers. Insatiable Gorgers is 2 red for a 5/3 creature vampire berserker. It has to attack every combat if able, and it has Madness for 3 and a red. A lot of people have been high on this card, and I just don't agree. It's way too similar to just like Cobble Brute, except it has to attack every turn. And Cobble Brute's never good, and Hulking Devil was never good. This gets 1 extra toughness, but it still trades down to 3 drops. Trades down to some 2 drops. I don't like this card. I'm going to have to keep an eye on it because so many people are high on it, but I think it's just terrible. I think people are seeing that big front number and ignoring the tiny little back number. I'm out on Insatiable Gorgers. I'm never first picking it, and I'm never really playing it until I see proof from somebody else. I don't want to be the one to prove it, that it is actually a decent card. Our last uncommon is Scour the Laboratory. Scour the Laboratory is 4 blue for an instant. It has Delirium. It costs 2 less to cast if you have Delirium, so it could be 2 blue. What does it do? It draws you 3 cards at instant speed. This is really good at discounted cost. Full cost is a little bit pricey. I'm not super sold on wanting to do that unless I'm a blue-black control deck or a very late-game deck, but I still think it is pretty darn solid. So solid, in fact, that I am going to keep it in frame. I think it could potentially be first pickable, especially if this format goes in any way slow. Our rare is Bedlam Reveler. Bedlam Reveler is 6 red for a creature, Devil Horror. It's a 3/4. It costs 1 generic mana less to cast for each instant and sorcery card in your graveyard. It has Prowess, and when it enters the battlefield, discard your hand, then draw 3 cards. I haven't had a chance to play with this, and I'm going to have to keep an eye on it because I do want to try out the blue-red spells deck many times, and this would be one of the kind of top ends of it, one of the creatures, one of the win conditions. So, of course, the ideal is you cast a bunch of tempo and a bunch of counter spells and stuff like that, and maybe some burn. Pretty much empty your hand, cast this for, significantly cheaper, ideally red. Have yourself a 3/4, discard whatever you have left in your hand, or nothing if you don't have a hand left, and then Ancestral Recall. I could see this being pretty darn solid, and I probably will first pick it the first time I see it, but it will definitely be in the discussion. And we have only one flip card. Our flip card is Ovenwalled Captive. Ovenwalled Captive is 1 and a green for a creature, Werewolf Horror. It's a 1/2. It has Defender. You can tap to add green to your mana pool. You can pay 5 green to transform it into Ovenwalled Abomination, which is a 4/6 that taps for colorless. I like Ovenwalled Captive a lot. It's a mana dork. It's a 2 mana 1/2 mana dork. Lately, we've been seeing 2 mana 2/1s, which still die just as easily as a 1/1. Having a 1/2 is really nice because it does block some of the early stuff a little bit better. The fact that later in the game it can become big and become a somewhat legitimate threat is solid. The ramp doesn't matter. The fact that it taps for colorless, I don't even slightly care, because when I'm at 7 mana, I don't care about getting to 9 ever. So I'm very happy with Ovenwalled Captive. I think it is absolutely a first pickable card. So we're looking at Bedlam Reveler, Scour the Laboratory, Wretched Grif, and Ovenwalled Captive. Early on in the format, I'm going to be tempted to take the rare just to get some experience with it. I don't know if ultimately that'll be the pick, and in fact, I'm willing to bet that ultimately that won't be the pick. Ultimately, I think the pick might just be Ovenwalled Captive and just go into sort of a green rampy deck. Scour the Laboratory really good, Wretched Grif really good, but I just don't know. For me, though, week 1, I'm going to take the Bedlam Reveler and get some experience with it. I think it could be a solid card. I think it could be a great way to jump into blue-red spells, but I would not fault anybody for taking the other cards. But let me know what you would have taken in the comments down below, as well as that little drop-down poll thingy in the top right-hand corner. Would you have taken the Reveler, the Captive, the Scour, the Grif, or something else? As always, if you have any questions, comments, or suggestions, you can find me on Twitter at TheManaLeak. That's L-E-E-K, like the vegetable, not the card. You can also find me at twitch.tv/TheManaLeak and facebook.com/TheManaLeak. You found me here on YouTube. Make use of that comment section down below. Click that thumbs up icon if you like my content, and click subscribe if you want to see more. As always, if you have any questions, comments, or suggestions, let me know. Otherwise, see y'all next time.